notes, I'd say C and D and G and A, which is 2/5, a step apart, over the course of 2 octaves. And so what we're doing is inviting players actually into this interface, and we support them with the playing from the MIDI bass. So wanted to kind of show you up front what this is all about. This is, again, alternate control using and utilizing an infrared field. Here we go. What's interesting about this is the headstock of my bass will also do that. So both instruments together. And so what we wanted to do today is actually just break them apart a little bit on the technical side, and also maybe on the creative level, kind of talk about what it's like to glue together all kinds of interesting MIDI gear. Wanted to kind of start by just doing a quick introduction. I teach the middle of 7 portfolio classes that you have probably inside of your curriculum. Like many of the programs in the ecosystem, we actually have set up the portfolio series as a way for you to be creative when you're taking all these technical classes and learning the things that are required in terms of the technical steps for working with gear. Sometimes you don't get a chance in those content classes to actually be as creative as you want to. So we put together the portfolio series as a way for you to actually have an entire class dedicated to being creative with the classes that you've taken in that semester or in that cycle. So I teach right in the middle of the 7. I'm actually in portfolio number 4 in the audio production program, and we are actually remixing using as content some of the songs that are coming from the Cambridge library. It's a multi-track library, and so we're asking students to go find a project, load a multi-track, and then remix and actually do groove changes, maybe even harmonic changes if they want to, over the course of the month. So a fun review and a really interesting place for me to be in terms of the entire program, because I kind of get to catch the students wherever they're at and figure out as quickly as possible what will be most appropriate to move them forward and to get really good variations of an original multi-track onto their portfolio page. So I like diving into the sequencing class also with recording arts and show pro students, as well as music production. And sometimes I'm on campus, usually monthly, to bring this instrument and let folks see what's going on with wired frets and the new paradigm in music, which I believe is going to be coming real soon. So I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of which classes you'd see me in, probably sequencing class or sequencing technology, and also portfolio 4 in the audio production program. So I appreciate, I want to say thank you to John Curtis and to Brian Smithers also for allowing me to come in today and say hi to all you folks. The big catch up about this instrument is that it's coming to the United States in the spring or summer is what we're looking at. They just actually are opening a new factory in Australia. This instrument I bought, I'll kind of let you guys see what this looks like. It looks like a Fender jazz bass. It's modeled exactly like one. And I bought this in 2009, so it's 12 years old almost going on. And it still plays like a beast, but if I hold it up real quick, I want you guys to, if you can, zoom in on the fretboard, and I'm going to pull up a shot of it also. If you look at the frets themselves, you'll actually see a bunch of cuts on these frets. And you'll see all the wires. If I turn it just a little bit like this, you can see all the wiring. That's probably a good way to see all the triggers. These are actually triggers, so when I touch the strings to the frets, that's how I get music. And think of it this way: if I've got an MPC, and you guys may be familiar with the music production centers that have been made by Akai for years, those have 16 buttons over the top. So if I put my hand in the position here on the bass, you notice that I've actually got 4 strings and 4 fingers. That's 16 buttons. Okay, so that's an MPC. Here's another one. Here's another one. I like this one. May have lost the infrared. We'll see if I can get it back. spin it just a little bit. We're going to probably invite some folks up here to play a little bit in just a bit. So this instrument is actually one of a line of instruments that are coming out. And I want to talk about the company real quick. Industrial Radio is located in Sydney, Australia. They're moving their factory actually while we're speaking to you. And they're going to be moving a couple hundred miles away to, I think, somewhere north in New South Wales. But we are excited because the inventor of this instrument for decades now has been making professional instruments like this one. At the time that I bought it, this was a $4,000 instrument. The new ones that are coming out in the summer are listed, as far as I can tell, and this is incredible for me to think about, they're under $1,000. Now there's 4 models of guitars. This is a Fender jazz bass. They also make a precision bass, and they also do a Stratocaster and a Telecaster. So they're staying inside of that entire Fender series of guitars, famous guitars with wired frets. Now, one of the things I really want to talk about is maybe like what the future might bring with instruments like this. I'll give you kind of a supposition about going to the store and buying a traditional analog guitar. Let's say you buy a Fender jazz bass. You can go to the website Fender Play, and you can actually start taking lessons for free. There's thousands of users, there's thousands of lessons, and people are going in there all the time. But one of the things that you'll notice is that there is no digital portal. So suddenly with this guitar, I can actually plug into the internet and play content on a page. In fact, you're hearing me do that right now. I'm playing the content on the page of my laptop. It's the same as having a mouse and interacting with content on the screen or on a page on a website. Pardon. So basically I'm doing the same thing. So imagine now interactive lessons, or the ability to have multiple users taking a lesson at the same time, and all the information is digital in real time. So a really true paradigm shift in terms of being able to learn guitars and being able to learn bass. I've talked to the manufacturers about going to other instruments like tenor guitar, ukulele, whatever we can manage in terms of the electronics. Interesting, about 12 years ago, I'll show you the back of this instrument. This is where the motherboard is. You guys see the big black panel back here? This is the motherboard. If you take it off, all you're going to see is chips in terms of hooking up all the logic for the transmission of analog playing into MIDI data. It's all happening here on the bass. The new electronics for these new instruments is all going to fit in this little cavity right here where the control knobs are. They're not going to have to route out the back. Nothing like that's going to have to happen again. So it's amazing how things have changed in that period of time. That's probably what's pulled a lot of the cost down also, is just the way the electronics has again been miniaturized, and it fits in just a very small pocket now. The wired frets are really the key. And I will tell you that this bass likes to have nickel strings. That's probably the best alloy to use for string to fret contact in terms of switches. And you guys notice it'll miss every once in a while, and you'll probably see me smile when that happens because I think I played the right note. So I've come off stage, sometimes people say, "You look like you're having so much fun," and I think they have no idea how many notes I played wrong. So let me try some samples for you. And actually what's interesting is you're hearing lots of layers of sound, and if you guys want to pull up the software real quick, I'm going to go ahead and kind of show you the interface here. You notice I put this together in main stage, and I'm going to close down this area on the screen here that's got the input for the pianos. You notice you can see MIDI coming through in real time on the G. Here's D. Notice there's a snare on there. In fact, you can see the drum channels kind of kicking in the background here. Pulling real light on the strings. I'm going to push down the pedal on the floor. So if you watch the yellow text, watch velocity. See if I can get it to engage where you guys can see these numbers while they're flying by. There we go. So I'm actually playing with the snare right there, and what you'll notice is if I go into the drum channel, I'm looking at actually the old version, the XS24 from the old version of Logic. That's what's sitting in main stage right now. But I'll pop into the software real quick and just let you see what it looks like inside of this sampler where I put the snare drum. And I'll just highlight these for you guys real quick in the software so you can see this. You notice that note right here, that's D. That's the open string. You can see it's all velocity cross switching, so depending on how much I dig in, I get more or less snare, and all the instruments are being programmed that way. You can notice there's shakers and all kinds of stuff that are being triggered in real time. That's one of the things I really like about playing this way. Hashtag no freaking spacebar is kind of what I'm going with for now. Question mark, exclamation point at the end, I'm not sure. I'm not going to call out DJs yet, but if they start getting snarky with me, I might. Yeah, everything is actually live. And the same thing with the infrared. Time for the news break. Okay, so I'm driving samples through the software. Other songs, actually, I'll give you another one real quick. I'm going to leave Drive by Incubus in there. That's what you were hearing. And let me launch some David Bowie. Wow. All right, now that I'm warm, I'll try that again. Ready to go. Now, string to fret contact is what makes this work, so I'm actually rubbing this string into the fret because it's misfiring. So I'm trying to figure out as many songs as I can fit over the course of an entire bass neck, but that's one of the ones that I've been playing with. I'm going to actually change patches real quick, and let me show you that pulling on the switch right here on the bass actually gives me a patch change in the software, and I'm going to tune down to D. And let's go ahead and check things real quick as I go on. Kind of keeping an eye on the clock here. Looks like we'll be able to do another few minutes for sure, and maybe get an opportunity also to answer some questions. If you guys have some interest in this instrument, please get in touch with Steve Chick at industrialradio.com.au in Australia and let him know that you're interested in seeing the new instruments when they come out in the summer. So I'm down to drop D. I'm going to actually tune real quick. I'm going to turn the tuner on and just check. You guys notice the arpeggiator is actually triggering every time I hit a note. sends it off. So if when I'm tuning, I usually go down about 5 or 10 cents. Actually, I'm you guys hear samples everywhere. Here's one. So Lenny Kravitz with Pink Floyd, and anything else that you can think of in terms of being able to mash up samples. So I'm having a lot of fun just throwing stuff together and laying it onto the fretboard and seeing what I get. But wanted to kind of show you the inside workings of some of the software here. So other things that we can talk about is actually the idea of creating some sort of underlayer for sound. And one of the things that you'll notice about the way that I've got the mixer here on the screen, and I'll just pull this up in the software again real quick, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see all the channels here. You notice there's a lot of gray right in here. This is actually what I would call the underpainting of my sound, and if I turn all this other stuff off, I'm going to mute here and here. All these are the songs that I've grabbed samples from. Actually, Away right there is Lenny Kravitz. Tell Me Something Good from Chaka Khan. There's others, right? So I'm trying, I haven't even named that one yet. I have to go look and see what samples are in there. The leap motion is still on. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to push this up to Unity Gain real quick if you guys will bear with me. And this is the core of my sound. And notice there's a lot of layers here just by hitting it, right? But there's stomps and shakers. I'm going to turn the bass off so you don't hear the strings. So, triggers again. Let me turn the drums on. That helps a little bit. On the low string, I've actually programmed a bunch of chords here. So notice. That's in here in the chord triggers, and you might notice that depending on the notes that I play. So one note from the bass is actually creating chords in the Rhodes piano. Okay, those kind of layers is actually what I've got going. And then basically what we're doing is either taking the infrared field, I have to still kind of study this and figure out different notes and different combinations. I'm playing much more like a guitar player, you notice. And so all the shapes that I'm trying to figure out are still kind of winding around through my hands, but really a fascinating experience for anybody that wants to jump in on this. And what's really cool about this too is that I'm not really worried in terms of other people that want to jump in on this instrument in the next couple of years, because you will take yourself in a completely different place, I'm sure, than what I'm doing with this mess. So I'm really going to encourage you, if not provoke you, I don't want to be an influencer. I'd rather be a provocateur when it comes to this. So provoking with 4 strings today. Imagine what you can do with 6. And the reality is, too, you can turn MIDI off and you can just play straight guitar or straight bass. There is a 1/4-inch jack here besides the big 15-pin plug. You'll actually notice, I'll kind of turn it this way where I can plug this bass straight in and play. There it is, a 1/4-inch jack. So, digital guitar. Like I said, new paradigm, new paradigm. When it comes to the programming of the infrared field, something is happening right now that I want you guys to keep an eye on. And what I want to do is actually just show you real quickly the kind of the idea of this device right here. This company is almost open source, and I was introduced to their products probably about 5 or 6 years ago in the form of now called Leap Motion. And actually, I'm going to pull up their software on the screen real quick so you can see what the calibration software looks like when I put my hand through this space. There we go. That's one of the ways to calibrate in here. We can actually spin this as we go. And if we include the software that's driving the sound at the same time, put it down here, there it is. See if we can get them both on the screen at the same time here. There it is. And let's see if we can get both. And now the bass. Ringtone. So if there's anybody out here in the crew that would be interested in playing, we've kind of invited some people over. I don't mind doing this myself, but I kind of wanted to show you where we're at with interactive music. So imagine this in a club, in a restaurant, where you could actually go up to the stage and choose how much you want to be involved in a performance. You can stand and watch if you want to, or you can jump in, or not, right? Pick up an instrument. We've been talking about putting together bands, prefer not to play this solo actually in terms of bass player. I always prefer to play with a drummer and with a guitar player or a piano player, and then the crowd play out in front as a soloist. So that's kind of where we're going with this. As much music on the surface, so you kind of choose how far you want to go with it. Give you an idea of what we're doing. Audio production. Maybe I'll start even if there are any quick questions that come up. We'll take a peek real quick and just see if anybody's curious about the software or what you see going on.
Yeah.
Particular.
Check. You guys hear me through that?
MIDI software. There we go. Get things stopped again. And push this through. So Leap Motion has now been bought by a company called Ultraleap.
Sure.
And Ultraleap is actually the one that's releasing this software now. They were hard to find for a little while, but I was expecting like there was before Leap Motion that in Ultraleap we're going to find a large user community. And I think you guys can see the advantages of being able to have an interface like this for music. Let me show you real quick what happens when I go over here and move this track so it doesn't play. I want you to see the interface actually of the software, so I'm going to hide this and get back to here. And the reason I'm doing this, I don't want it to make any noise just yet. I want you to imagine when you can see the yellow hand. In fact, notice every time I pull it back in, it changes color. You guys seeing that? So when you come into this interface, imagine that if you have difficulties any challenges, physical challenges that would keep you from playing an instrument, that suddenly you've got this interface here. And notice what happens. I'm going to try and get this squared up so I can put my hand right in the right place. Notice like my three fingers at the top, they each have a box, right? And my pinky may be down here and the thumb may be here. That's a very natural position for my hand. I could actually start playing piano, virtual piano. There's all kinds of things to do with this. And you notice I'm really not moving my hand that much in space, okay? So a new paradigm here. Also, the bass is very similar too. I'm not doing very much to actually get a lot of sound. It's a lot of programming, but the pre-programming is being done by a lot of folks behind the surface right now. So when this launches, there's going to be a lot of fun to be had right away, is what we hope. We're looking forward to guests actually coming and helping out with this. One of them that has been here in the last few years is Doug Wimbish, who you may know from Living Color, the band. Maybe you guys know the song Cult of Personality. Doug is one of the original bringers of funk, and we got Doug coming in, and we're just going to try and kind of let things go and show each other different techniques on this instrument. And we're basically building a curriculum to get people started. Like I said, these have been professional instruments for we're actually starting to build maybe something like you would recognize Suzuki violins as a curriculum to learn music, or the organ. Instruments that you might have seen in elementary school. All the xylophones and the little wooden instruments are made by Orff. Chord makes piano labs, and so in some of the middle schools and high schools, you can walk in and you'll see 24 pianos connected together. Everybody's got headphones. You can connect through the instructor station to any players that you want to, broadcast anything you want, teach anything you want. And so now, here's wired frets, and we're going to start doing a curriculum to actually maybe try and let this roll is be able to start with real simple instruments that young players can start to develop a technique on to get to instruments that require a little bit more power. You notice I am playing guitar technique on this instrument, and so it's required a lot of patience for me to practice through this and figure out how much torque is actually required to get all these strings down, because bass players usually play one note at a time, but you notice I'm actually playing chords like a guitar player. So I don't think I've lost the bass player perspective yet. I'm trying to actually keep things the playing. But it sure is fun to put the infrared field out front, because it really puts me back in a support position for playing, which is much more comfortable, okay? Like MIDI instructors, I feel comfortable stepping out and making a fool, but at the same time, I don't mind coming back into a support position and letting somebody else have just as much fun. And so that's kind of one of the I think, the ideas behind these types of performances, is really just to invite people in that maybe had never had an experience with playing, in a sense, with live musicians. And it's like sitting right here waiting for you. So actually, again, I'm going to check and see how we're doing with time and just see if any questions have come in at all.
We do have a question.
Great.
This is from Barcode Audio. Can you use it like an MPC, for instance, load a kick, snare, hi-hat, and play those like a one-shot?
Exactly. That's actually how I'm playing the drums right now. So, all string instruments, the strings overlap. Of sounds up in here that actually haven't been used, and what I'm doing is I'm taking all those samples, I'm dropping them way down. Notice the octave down here is see it on the camera here. There we go. C1 is all these notes down in here. This is where my playing range is. You guys see the first note? Here's my low E or low D. Right? So when I get to this key, that's where the snares are. So notice if I trigger it with the key, with the mouse, that it gives me a full-on snare, but if I play it, depending on velocity. So the kick, I think, is sitting here. So there's very little. Hi-hat might be the other one. In fact, I think this is the kick, and I think this is the hi-hat up here. Right? So you can see, I can see the kick being highlighted. There we go, there's the kick. And D, because I didn't want the kick to hit at the same time as the snare. So people will ask me, where's the snare drum coming from? It's right there. And it's actually here. It's here. All right. I'm in drop D. Looking for the wrong place. You guys understand how fun this instrument is. I have to start remembering so many layers at the same time as I'm playing. But there's plenty of songs to have fun with. And in this case, like I said, Pink Floyd and Lenny Kravitz. And let me see if I can find what other good. I'm going to go back to Drive and Pain. See if I can finish up a little bit more here. Did that help? I hope I answered the question. I'm into a new patch, and actually if I open up these drums here, you'll probably see maybe a similar or different setup. Sometimes I'll alter them a little bit. That looks pretty much the same to me. Kick and hi-hat, layered snares. Does that help a little bit? Great question. Others?
None at this time.
Some might be wondering about the ability to kind of take this in other directions. Let me do some different time signatures for you. Basically time-based delays to do this. I wanted to show you real quickly the math on this also. And some of you have probably been working through these types of formulas, but thought it was worth, as long as we're reviewing stuff, how I'm actually calculating these things. So we're starting with beats per minute all the time, that's what you always see in the setting inside of the DAWs. But what you notice is that we can redefine that formula. And so beats per minute is also quarter notes per minute, because this is a beat in music. A lot of times the time signature is reflected that way in a 3/4 or 4/4 time signature for a quarter note at the bottom. So quarter note is a beat. So beats per minute could be quarter notes per minute. And then notice what we do on the other side of the equation. We're taking a minute, we're dividing it into 60 times 1,000 seconds, 1,000 milliseconds rather. And so we get 60,000 milliseconds. So another way to describe beats per minute is how many quarter notes are hitting every 60,000 milliseconds. Okay, that is beats per minute. That's how the computer is actually calculating it. When we do things like quantization, when we're using time-based delays, the computer's doing that math all the time. And so when I cut samples from the songs that I'm laying onto the fretboard, I'm actually doing the same math. So I'm going to show you how that works. Notice that if you go to eighth note delays, if you want it to come back twice as fast, the computer, interestingly enough, thinks that like this. So you only want to do a half an hour, right? Basically, it's like a half a minute, right? Or a half of this. Here's 3/4, or halfway in between, right? So the computer doesn't stay as a constant, doesn't stay with 1 minute, right, as a constant. It actually is doing the math on that time in every function that you choose. We're always thinking about it from this point of view in music in terms of how long the notes are. The computer's actually looking at it in terms of milliseconds. And when you do this math, you end up with a number that can give you how many milliseconds there are between clicks in each note. That's really what you want to know. So a lot of that math is actually happening under the surface. And we're teaching that in the classes to make sure you guys are really comfortable in that area. Obviously, the computer can do a lot of the math for you, but it sure does help when you're cutting samples and listening to music and trying to make things a little bit more organic, that you know the number, and then you can use your ear to confirm that number or not, right? And then maybe manipulate it, and then use your ear again. I always try and trust my ear as the last word on my decision making in terms of music. I don't like necessarily going just by the numbers. So use your ear as you do this, and what you'll notice is that you can make things lay back a little bit, or push the beat a little bit, and be real subtle with some of this stuff. We're trying to do the same thing as I'm playing here. I would say I'm a fairly good player, but as soon as I started doing layers on a MIDI instrument, it changed completely the way that I felt even about making music. And one of the things I wanted to show you is just the ability to record inside of here. So the record button's right up here, and basically what I'm doing right now is recording whatever comes through the master bus. Time we get the infrared involved too, all I have to do is lean in to get another layer of sound. But here's the recording that we just made. I'm actually going to push this up to 0 and I'll show you real quick what I've been doing in terms of kind of trying to fulfill the entire production spectrum, the entire workflow, and something like a loop, I think. So what I'm going to do is to save this file, and just quickly, if you guys don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and load loudness penalty from a website, and I'm going to drop this file in and see how it would stand up to Spotify, to Apple Music, etc. I'm just going to drag this way straight in. Notice that Spotify right where it's at, it's actually pushing up another 1.7 dB right. Pandora's the same way. But YouTube, Amazon, Deezer, they all feel pretty good about it right now. So I'm always checking my work, in a sense, by going in here. And in terms of level, this is way down, like -15, -14. Not like producing CDs anymore. But you notice that at the level I'm at, in terms of what's comfortable for broadcast also, I hope this is you can play this back inside the engine. This is what it sounds like. Get an opportunity to check cool. So listen, we're maybe getting close to being out of time, but I wanted to take a couple more questions. If there's just anything else that you guys have a question about, looks like we're getting up towards the end of things here. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you again. Let me thank again Brian Smithers and John Curtis for letting me come in and give you guys updates on the industrial radio, MIDI bass, and the new line of instruments again coming out spring and summer of 2022. So we'll give you a check-in next time we can, and always make sure to try and chime in with us during the town halls for audio production. We always look forward to touching base with you. So you guys have a great week. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.